I um, I came across some statistics from divorce care a few years ago that was really interesting to me. And the statistics were taken from people who had been divorced for 5 years or more. And one of the questions that they were asked is, um, what would you do differently if you could go back to the period of time when you divorced? And I was really somewhat stunned by this, but as I thought about it, I wasn't as shocked as maybe I was initially. 5 years later, I think the statistic was 80% of the individuals who were interviewed said this: I wish I had tried harder to save our marriage. Now, to me, that's very interesting and sad in many respects, because I think sometimes people get discouraged in the moment. They get they allow their emotions to control them to the point that they make a decision that they later on, if these statistics are true, that they later on regret that they made. And so it's a reminder about persevering through difficult times. Many of the couples, this was the other side of it, many of the couples who'd gone through difficult times, contemplated divorce, even approached divorce lawyers, talked about how thankful that they were that they had endured that time and come through it and were experiencing better times as a result. But we get impatient. So tonight we're going to be drawing from Song of Songs, chapter 8, and talking about lifelong love. And so let's jump into to this on chapter 8. Somebody read verses 1 through 4 as we get started tonight.
Oh, I wish you were my brother, who nursed at my mother's breast, and I could kiss you no matter who was watching, and no one would criticize me. I would bring you to my childhood home, and there you would teach me. I would give you spiced wine to drink, my sweet pomegranate wine. Your left arm would be under my head, and your right arm would embrace me. Promise me, O women of Jerusalem, not to awaken love until the time is right.
Okay, we have talked about perhaps two dream sequences that take place within the Song of Songs. In these first few verses, it appears to me that beloved is imagining. She's daydreaming a little bit, and she's wishing for something to be the case. So the question asked in Matthew 22:30, Jesus intimates that marriage is for this life, that after the resurrection and his return, the lasting relationship among God's people is as children of God, not romantic partners. What does beloved mean by saying she wished that lover was her brother? I mean, is the Bible here supporting incest? I mean, what is it that she's saying that when she says, I wish he was my brother, then I would grab you and I would kiss you and nobody would criticize or despise me? What's she talking about? I mean, how would you like, Josh? How'd you like one of your sisters to talk like that?
I don't even like that thought. That's kind of weird.
Well, I think that what you're saying is the 21st century sensibility of this. I think that's the way that a lot of people reading this would react. But let me give you a little cultural background that may clear this up. Public displays of affection were against cultural norms of that day. A young woman was only allowed to touch her brothers or her father in public. Isn't that interesting? And so what she's saying is, I wish you were my brother so I could embrace you, so I could show my love for you, but that's against the cultural norms. She's frustrated because she wants to seduce lover and she feels like she has to control herself. And she really doesn't want to. And there's that warning again that comes in verse 4. What was that warning all about?
Don't awaken love prematurely.
Yeah, there's a right time and a right place for it, and now is not the time. And even though she's frustrated by it, she also recognizes that that is the case. Now, I probably should say to you, and this is probably going to be a downer for some, as unromantic as it may sound, I've reminded Laurie to value our eternal relationship as brother and sister in Christ above our romantic relationship as husband and wife. Because as Matthew 22:30 and following say, we're going to be like angels at the resurrection. There will be no one married or given in marriage when Jesus comes again. So our lasting relationship is that of brother and sister in Christ. Which brings us to the next question. We're married in this life, yes. Yes, we've been married for 33 years. How do you think that viewing one another primarily as brothers and sisters in Christ, how do you think that would affect marriages? Curious what you think about that.
Dale,
Yeah,
looking at it from one side, to me, that make a stronger marriage. Viewing is, this is my sister, somebody I love, and I'll take care of, and it just a stronger meaning, I guess.
why do you say that? Why do you think that would strengthen the marriage?
As a rule, to me, you really have a lot of stronger care for your brother or your sister.
Okay.
So if you have that with your wife, that makes it even better.
Okay. Others, what do you think about this? How do you think it would affect marriage?
A couple of things.
Yeah.
I think, seeking to protect someone's soul makes us more selfless and maybe more alert to what the other person is going through. If we're thinking about, I want to protect, of course, all my brothers and sisters in Christ, but if I'm specifically thinking about my little sister, I always want to protect her and I want to make sure no harm comes to her. And if something bad is, happening to her, I want to do everything I can to stop it. And so it's kind of that watching out, I think, in order to keep the other person safe. And then also to have kind of what Jim was saying, but like a deeper connection with someone that is going to be there after death. If we're viewing, if we're thinking about the fact that marriage isn't going to be in place eternally, we want to cultivate that stronger bond, like he was saying, because that bond of brother and sister isn't going to be bound to this earthly life.
Okay. Okay, so we're talking about a different level, and I'm going to open that question back up in just a moment for those who have additional answers. We've talked about sex being a wonderful glue to the relationship, but it's a poor basis of the relationship. We've talked about friendship being an important basis of the relationship, but now we're talking about a whole different level, and that is to see one another as pilgrims on a faith journey to the Father, and treating and being interested in one another's spiritual well-being is another level of relationship. It's another level of relational intimacy. And so I'm curious, those of you who haven't given any input, do you have thoughts about how you think viewing one another primarily as brothers and sisters in Christ would affect marriages?
I would think in a perfect sense, it would create a, or not perfect, the correct view of that. It would improve marriages for sure. But I think, if you have the you have the right foundation with that. But I don't know. When I first read that, I was kind of thinking, I don't know. I don't, that it might be kind of weird, unromantic, kind of what the world has built a marriage to be. It just tears all that down. So that's how I kind of see it.
Yeah, and you have been one of the leading voices in our class of talking about the poor teaching that's in the world and how it messes up God's plans. So we're coming across another thing that's worldly instead of godly, aren't we?
Yes, sir.
Let me highlight a few things of how I think viewing one another primarily as brothers and sisters in Christ would affect marriages. Number one, I think it might take a lot of the pressure off by lessening expectations. And I'm going to come back to this later. There's a lot of expectation that people bring to the marriage relationship, that if I saw you primarily as a brother and sister in Christ, or sister in Christ, who I wanted to help know Father and get to heaven, it would take some pressure off. Also, we might be more committed to helping one another get to heaven if that's how we saw the relationship primarily. Thirdly, our relationship may become more spiritually focused if we saw one another primarily as brother and sister in Christ. And hopefully all of this would lead us to be more supportive of and long-suffering with one another. That again, we wouldn't focus so much on my feelings or what I want, and I get frustrated and impatient. I'd be thinking about, wait a minute, I got to see the big picture here. I've got to see this as lifelong love, because I'm helping someone, I'm going with someone to an eternal place. And that changes how you would do a lot. I think that would change how a lot of couples do their relationship. Additional comments before we go on?
Dale.
Yes, Steve.
Steve. I had to really think about this one for a while, because it's hard, as you know, it's hard to get your head kind of wrapped around that. But you need some commonalities to talk about in a marriage. And I think one of the things, after 50 years of marriage, the thing that's been a blessing is that we had the common love for Christ together. So it gave us a common starting point when there was maybe an argument or something ensued, or always come back. We knew the value we thought of each other as a husband and wife was important, more important was our own individual relationship with Christ. And so I think it gave us starting points to have hard conversations about a lot of things, about where we had disagreements, that where we had likes and we had misconceptions about certain things. And so I just think it's a common ground. So as I look at Linda, you know, I know that that's helped us a bunch through our marriage. Marriage is tough, and I mean, there's just things, because when you're trying to become one, you take that individual, oh, it's about me, and you set that aside and say, we've got to become one. There's got to be a commonality to talk about. And as a sister in Christ, I love Linda a whole bunch for that. I love her spirit because she has a God and a Savior who she understands. So it gives us a commonality to talk about. So during the hard times, it gives you a frame of reference that people who don't understand being a brother or sister in Christ don't have.
Absolutely. Thank you for expounding on that. So I think.
Well, I got to tell you, peer pressure again, because I think there's not many of us on there. And you kept saying who else hadn't talked. I hadn't talked, and so I felt the peer pressure to say something.
Hey, I can call you out by name, Steve. I can do that. And I will, if that's what you want.
I know you will. I spoke up.
Good choice. Good choice. All right, let's go on to verses 5 through 7. Somebody read those for us, please.
Who is that coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? Under the apple tree I wakened you. There your mother was in labor with you. There she who bore you was in labor. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is strong as death. Generously.
Jealousy.
Huh?
Jealousy.
Oh, jealousy is fierce as the grave. It flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised. Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it for this one. A seal, which is talked about primarily in verse 6, and it's talked about a couple of times. A seal signified and still signifies ownership and authority. So what is beloved saying about vows and commitments? What is she saying here? Let me read verse 6 to you again. Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death. Its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like blazing fire, like a mighty flame. What is she saying?
I think that she's saying that love is valuable over everything else. Like, you don't want to throw away love for wealth or some other thing, or and it can withstand things that are hard, like the waters and winds and things that are, going to come through. Setting, and I think of putting someone as a seal over your heart. I think kind of like she's like a badge on his heart. Like, this is who's going to protect my heart, and having it on his arm, like as sort of an outward reflection to everyone, like, this is who I'm committed to. And, they can see, like, I belong to this person.
I appreciate you saying that, especially coming from a woman's perspective, Andrea. What she seems to be saying is that she is fine with him owning her. And I don't mean owning in the sense that she is his property or controlling her, but in the sense that she belongs to him. She welcomes that. And that basis is what enables them to persevere, as Andrea said, through circumstances in life. Now, the middle of verse 5 talks about apple trees, and that represents the fruit of love. They made a vow based on their love. Remember, early in our study, we read from Genesis 2:24 and Ephesians 5:25 and 28 that talk about becoming one. And so what Beloved is doing here, she's highlighting the seriousness of vows and that love has an enduring quality. True love has, what's the word language she uses here? It's as unyielding as the grave. It's as strong as death. And so, I mean, those are pretty strong words to talk about the enduring nature of love. Now, love that is selfish and focused on getting will not endure. But godly love is about giving. And that's able to persevere through difficult times. As Paul said in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 8, love never ends. That's the reason earlier in our study, we talked about the difference between infatuation and love and how hard it is sometimes to tell the difference between infatuation and love. The reason a lot of people's relationships do not endure is because their relationship is not, it's not based on love, it's based on an infatuation. And so she's pointing out that true love is enduring, it perseveres, it is able to get through hard times. And as we're going to see at the very end of this chapter, at the very end of the book, she's still dealing with the hard times of being part of Solomon's harem. And yet the relationship that she has with lover is able to persevere through that. So it's a pretty interesting perspective here. So how do we protect our marriages and live our true commitment? I had the privilege of presiding at Jim and Jency's wedding. I had the privilege of presiding at Andrea and Trent's wedding. And one of the things that I talked about was that this was a commitment until death separates you. How do we protect marriages to really live out that kind of commitment? Who's got some things?
Dale?
Okay, let me say this one thing, just kind of get us generated, and I'll come to Jim, and I saw Andrea ready too. The first thing I think needs to happen is we need to acknowledge that there are dangers that threaten our marriages and that all of us are vulnerable to those dangers. Now that should humble us and make us vigilant in protecting our marriages when we recognize that there are dangers and all of us are susceptible to. Okay, so I think that's a beginning point of a recognition. Jim, go ahead.
Well, I was going to start out by saying, to me, you like I did, Jency, a deep care for her, wanting to be with her and to help her and be my partner, and once you get to that point, that's something you want to do. God gives you that direction and helps you, and it's great.
And you have been wonderful. Jincy gives testimony to this. You have been wonderful at demonstrating that to her. I mean, she, I know, feels loved by you.
Yes.
And, yeah, and so that's a key element. Andrea, what were you going to say?
I was going to say just a couple of things that I'd written down were to honor one another above ourselves, and to commit to loving each other at all times. The times, like you were saying, where one of us falls short or where something bad happens in our lives. And whenever you gave your opening statement and kind of prodded our minds to think about this, you were talking about the dangers that we're all susceptible to. And so I think also not just thinking about the times that I want to be long suffering for Trent when he goes through things, but that I need to be vigilant and watching out for ways that I might be selfish or ways that I might sin. Because, if we're both, I think in order to protect our marriages, we have to be seeking God first all the time, and knowing that He is going to be constantly purifying us and transforming our hearts if we will present ourselves to Him routinely.
Very good. So you all will remember the triangle that I drew of you, your fiance, and God, and if both of you make growing in your relationship with God the key, it would cause the two of you to become closer. So relationship with God and pursuing that, as well as all the other things that Andrea said. Who else has something they think that would protect our marriages and enable them to live out our true commitment?
Dale.
Yes, Steve.
I mean, as a professional PhD prepared counselor, I'm sure you hear this all the time. Well, I just don't love him anymore. I don't love her anymore. Why do people fall out of love? And I'm just asking that as from your perspective, or why do they think they fall out of love?
Yeah, I mean, each situation, I guess, is different, but I've got two thoughts. One is, it makes me wonder if it was true love or infatuation in the first place. And the second thing is, people put too much stock in their feelings. When love is not a feeling, love is ultimately a decision. And so I think a lot of times people their feelings are affected by so many things, and they begin to trust their feelings instead of making a decision to love.
So if someone tells you that, you tell them love her or love him. And that requires action on our part, requires that desire to be a lifelong partner for the right reasons, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I'd want to find out what's behind the feelings. What is it that's caused those feelings to change? I'd want to find that out. But ultimately, a decision to love will often stir those feelings to change into passion again.
Thank you.
Let me add just a few things here. No matter the relationship, you're dealing with imperfect people. There's no magic person out there that will be exactly what you want them to be. And as I've told my children over the years, in fact, my son Jared reminds me of this periodically because it's stuck with him. Sometimes people think that the grass is greener on the other side, or if they find a new relationship, it will be better than what they've got. And what I told Jared that stuck with him is, you always take you with you. Wherever you go, you always take you. And sometimes it's not the other person that's the problem. Sometimes it's you. And so addressing what's going on with you may be a much better thing to do. All relationships are flawed because they have flawed people in them. So here's some practical things that I think can protect our marriages. One, don't share intimate information with a person of the opposite sex. All of a sudden you're sharing an emotional intimacy with someone who that can turn into a physical intimacy. If your marriage is struggling, seek help. And I said I was going to come back to this later. Don't expect so much out of the other person. This is fascinating to me. A secular, world-renowned marriage therapist believes that expectations, too many expectations, is the greatest danger to marriage today. Not infidelity, not finances, not communication problems, too many expectations. She believes that there's too many expectations placed upon another human being and too much expectation placed on the relationship, that it cannot hold up under those kinds of pressures. Andrea has mentioned being close to God. We need to be honest. Many people lie to themselves about their innocent feelings and actions. Sin hides in the darkness. Jim talked about nurturing your relationship, especially the sexual part of it. As we've talked about, its play, so make it fun. Those are some of the things that I think will help protect our marriages and help people live out the commitment that we make when we stand before God, one another, and onlookers, the people who are wishing us well. Any additional thoughts before we move on?
Well, not that I do this very well, but I think it is important to understand what your mate needs, both sexually and psychologically. And most of the time, that's two different things for male and female. I mean, males tend to want to solve problems. When Linda would come home and talk about her second grade class, I thought she wanted me to solve a problem. What she wanted me to do is to listen to her. It took me about 10 years to figure out, don't try to solve the problem, just listen. And so, we see different perspectives. And so we've got to want what they want for them in us to be able to share that with them from their perspective. And I think a lot of times we come into marriage thinking that when we become one, that means that Linda will become like me, or heaven forbid, she grows a mustache. But anyway, what I'm saying is that selfishness, what I see with kids today is that they have so much baggage coming into that. The expectations that you just talked about are so huge because they're my expectations, but they're not our expectations. I think you have to have some comment. What are our expectations? You have to talk about them often, and you have to live and develop those expectations almost weekly, almost daily for each other, and then validate each other. Very good. And the fact that it only took you 10 years to pick up on that, you're faster than most of us men, Steve. So yeah. Way to go. 40 years later. All right, let's go verses 8 to 10. Somebody read those for us.
We have a little sister, and her breasts are not yet grown. What shall we do for our sister on the day that she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build towers of silver on her. If she is a door, we will enclose her with panels of cedar. I am a wall, and my breasts are like towers. Thus, I have become in his eyes like one bringing contentment.
Okay, we're back to this sensual language again. Early in the song, you'll remember, I believe it was in chapter 1, Beloved didn't appreciate the protectiveness of her brothers. Remember, they had her out working in the outside, and she was complaining that her skin was darkened by the sun, and because she had to work. And her brothers were kind of overseeing this. So What is her attitude now about her brother's protectiveness?
I think she sees the value in it because she knows that, well, from her perspective, the virtuous life that she's led up to this point is part of what makes her beloved, or her lover, so attracted to her.
Very good. I know they won't mind me sharing this. Kelly and Karen Rogers have told how their sons, Corey and Keith, used to protect their younger sister, Casey. They would evaluate how she dressed when she went to school. If they thought she was, it was too tight or too revealing or too anything, they would tell her to go back and change. They would evaluate who she dated, and Kelly and Karen didn't have to do any of that. The older brothers did that, and I think Casey probably in her younger years resented some of that, but over time she grew to appreciate it, and that's what we see with Beloved. Her more mature perspective helps her appreciate that their boundaries protected her physically and spiritually and emotionally. It enabled her to protect her heart, the boundaries that the brothers set for her. This was kind of interesting. I didn't think about it, and except in the context of what we're studying here. But my sister Vicky, who is 2 years younger than me, when she was, I think she was probably in 8th or 9th grade, probably in 8th grade. My parents reluctantly would let her go on a date, but she had an 8 o'clock curfew. Now that's when some people start their date, but that's when she had to be in, and my parents always made sure that I was around her and the boy whenever they came in from their 8 o'clock curfew. Now, that can feel overly restrictive, especially in our culture today, but those are wise things and only understood later, usually by the adolescent. That's the reason God gave parents to children, is because parents are the ones who need to see the big picture. Parents are the ones who need to see that this is a long range perspective here. We're trying to protect you from something you don't understand at your age and level of maturity. That's why we need older people in our lives, good parents in our lives, concerned adults in our lives to help us see things that we can't see in our immaturity. And Beloved came to understand that. She came to understand the value that her brothers brought in their protectiveness. Thoughts about that? All right, what does she mean when she says she is a door and a wall? Or it's actually if she is a door, and then she identifies herself in verse 10 as a wall. What's she saying here? The brothers had a different reaction to, how they would treat her, whether she was a door or a wall. What's she talking about? Think about what walls and doors do.
So if she's a wall and she's pure and she doesn't let seduction in, she doesn't open herself up to that, then it looks like her brothers are going to honor her and build her up with the silver and types of honoring mechanisms. But then if she's a door and she's vulnerable, they are going to have to do more heavy work and board her up. You know, they're going to have to, you know, use some sort of, they're going to have to use their own devices to make sure that the same outcome becomes about. They're just going to have to kind of do it themselves.
Very good, Andrea. When she talks about being a wall is used as a barrier. Okay, it closes things off. A wall does. A door is an entry point. And so what she's saying, what's being said here is that a wall it closes off sexual experience. A door says, I'm going to let you in. I'm open to sexual experience. And so by identifying herself as a wall, even though she says, you know, I now have mature breasts, as she refers to them as towers, she's saying she's closed to outside sexual experiences. She's off limits except to the one that she is committed to. All right. So we see the protection here taking place of the relationship. There's a boundary, proper boundary that's being talked about here. All right. Now, somebody read verses 11 through 14.
Solomon had a vineyard at Baal-Hamon. He let out the vineyard to keep. He let out the vineyard to keepers. Each one was to bring for its fruit 1,000 pieces of silver. My vineyard, my very own, is before me. You, O Solomon, may have the 1,000, and the keepers of the fruit 200. O you who dwell in the gardens with companions listening for your voice, let me hear it. Make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices.
All right. Once again, Solomon interrupts the intimate discussion between beloved and lover. Beloved is back in the royal court and must learn contentment away from lover as she is forced to engage in impersonal sex with Solomon. But how does the song end? How does it end, particularly in verse 14?
Is she asking him, her lover, to basically come and rescue her? Am I reading that right? Or no?
I think she is inviting him not to rescue per se, but she's once again initiating the sexual relationship. She's inviting him into that relationship again, which is an appropriate way to end a song about intimacy, for them to return to that shared intimacy. She may be forced by Solomon, but she was by choice giving herself to lover. And she was even taking the initiative in them coming together again, even after Solomon kind of interrupted their intimate sharing. So we've read the chapter 8 tonight. What stands out to you? What stands out to you tonight?
I'd have to say the viewpoint of how close that she wants to get, as far as calling her lover brother. just that language, but just having you explain that, I mean, that's what I took from it. It's kind of just a deeper intimacy, I guess.
Yeah, the fact that she knows that she can have him in private, but she wants to be able to have him in public. And that's pretty neat to be wanted that way. What else stands out to you all tonight?
One of the things that about the brother-sister relationship that I've always thought was cool, I always wanted a big brother because I just loved the thought of being protected and having someone, you know, who would protect me, you know, who would want to say, oh, back off, like that's my little sister. And that is, I think, what a husband does for a wife. Like that's how I feel with Trent. I feel like he protects me from harm. And I think that's the really neat thing about developing that kind of Philippian type love, you know, with a spouse, is that you really are protecting each other. And especially as the fairer sex, it just feels really good to be protected.
Yeah, and I think a lot of young men want to be chivalrous in that way today, but a lot of young ladies and their, I guess, desire for independence don't value that the way that I think they should. Others, what stands out to you tonight? Maybe particularly about lifelong love. What stands out to you? Anything stand out to you tonight?
Especially on that topic, part of verse 6, like Andrew talked about, set me as a seal on your heart, a seal on your arm, that I know yours and your mind. And that's kind of the purpose of wearing a wedding ring, to symbolize I belong to someone else, they belong to me. Just having that reminder, that symbol of this is forever.
Yeah, the wedding ring is meant to be that kind of seal, that kind of stamp of ownership, of someone who's already taken or belongs to someone else.
Well, in the willingness to profess that, to believe it, and to talk to each other about that, and to validate each other.
Yeah, which is again pretty neat. When we think about, and Josh again has talked so much about what he's been exposed to that is a lot of times a worldly perspective. When you look at this book that is about sexual intimacy, and it is so erotic in its symbolism and the language that it uses, but it is so holy at the same time. It has those protective barriers. It's exalting the lifelong nature of marriage and the relationship. And so we get a good picture here from this book about what God intended for intimacy to look like in a human's life. And so it's a beautiful thing. It's not ideal. They still had to deal with Solomon, but we see a lot of the ideals that God intended played out in this book. Other thoughts?
Well, it gives us a good explanation of the reconciliation that must happen. I think it was chapter 6 that had dealt with the reconciliation part, is that you kind of sometimes get past yourself to say, hey, for us to make this work, we've got to come to agreement on some things. And I love you, and I know you love me, but we've got to get past this issue that we've been dealing with and recommit. And I think that's part that's missing oftentimes today, is that ability to really reconnect and recommit and reconcile those relationships like they need to be.
Yeah, Steve, I think sometimes that people do not think they have the resources to be able to do that. And sometimes in and of themselves, they don't. In fact, I guess it would probably be accurate to say that none of us do. But with the power of God and the help of a good godly counselor or helper, people can reconcile. That's the end of the book, but we're not done. Now, next week is Thanksgiving, so we will not meet next week, but we do have one more class session. I think it's December the 4th or 3rd. It's the first Wednesday in December. In that class lesson, we're going to do a review of and highlight some of the things we've talked about through the class. And we're also going to deal with intimacy myths. Again, things that we might hear said around us, maybe accept it at face value without ever thinking about it, and deal with what the truth is of the matter. So that's how we're going to finish our last class session.